A truck driver saves an unconscious woman on a snowy road, but when he sees the tattoo on the back of her hand, his instincts scream that something about it feels dangerous. Little does he know, this is just the beginning of a life-changing twist. Stay tuned to find out more, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The snow was relentless, swirling through the darkness, reducing visibility to a few feet in front of his truck. Ryan's eyes were heavy, exhaustion clawing at him after countless hours on the road. But stopping wasn't an option, not when his daughter's life depended on him working these late shifts. The doctor's words played on a loop in his mind, cruel and unrelenting. Without the surgery, she won't make it. Those words haunted him, even more than the snow-covered roads stretching endlessly before him. His vision blurred, and he angrily wiped at his eyes. But then he saw it, a shadow, dark and motionless, lying by the roadside just up ahead. His heart jolted, and his foot slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a stop, tires screaming against the ice. He sat frozen, his breath fogging up the windshield as he stared at the figure half buried in snow. For a moment, he thought it was his exhausted mind playing tricks, but the snow swirling around the body proved it was real. His heart pounded as he jumped out of the truck, boots crunching through the snow as he stumbled toward the figure, fear twisting his gut. It was a woman, young and fragile-looking, her body sprawled awkwardly, face pale against the stark white snow. Her clothes were soaked, clinging to her body, offering no protection against the bitter cold. She looked like a broken doll, abandoned and left to freeze. He dropped to his knees beside her, fingers shaking as he checked for a pulse. Nothing. Panic clawed at him, his breath hitching as he frantically moved his fingers to her neck, praying for any sign of life. Then he felt it, a faint, fluttering beat. Relief surged through him, leaving him dizzy. She was alive, barely. But for how long? As he lifted her limp wrist, preparing to carry her to his truck, something caught his eye, a tattoo behind her palm, barely visible against her pale skin. It was intricate, a symbol twisting in delicate lines that seemed almost alive, mesmerizing and hauntingly beautiful. He frowned, a chill crawling down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. The design was unlike anything he had ever seen, yet it felt strangely familiar, as if it was meant to be remembered. But the thought slipped away before he could grasp it, replaced by a sense of urgency. There was no time to wonder about tattoos. She was freezing to death, and he was the only one who could save her. Ryan scooped her up, shocked by how light she was, as if life had already started to leave her. He rushed her to his truck, bundling her in his jacket before blasting the heater on full. Her skin was like ice, her body limp and fragile. He rubbed her hands, willing warmth back into them, his heart pounding in his chest. He pressed his fingers to her neck again, terrified that the faint pulse would be gone. But it was still there, weak but steady. Relief left him trembling, and he let out a shaky breath, leaning back against the seat. Who was she? And how did she end up here, alone and freezing to death in the middle of nowhere? His eyes drifted to the tattoo again, curiosity sparking even through his fear. There was something about it, something that felt important, but he couldn't place it. He shook his head, forcing himself to focus. She needed help, not his questions. He grabbed his phone, fingers shaking as he dialed 911, his voice cracking as he explained the situation to the operator. As he spoke, a faint whisper drifted through the truck's cabin, soft and broken. His head snapped around, eyes wide as he realized her lips were moving. He leaned in, heart racing. What did you say? Her eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused, her voice a faint rasp. Who am I? Confusion twisted her face, fear flickering in her eyes as she looked at him, pleading for answers he didn't have. I don't remember. I don't know who I am. Her hand moved to the tattoo, fingers tracing the lines, her eyes widening as a shiver ran through her. She looked terrified, as if the symbol scared her. Ryan's stomach twisted, his unease growing. There was something deeply wrong, something he didn't understand. But before he could ask more, her eyes rolled back, her body going limp as she collapsed into unconsciousness once more. Panic seized him, and he slammed the truck into gear, tires spinning as he raced toward the hospital, heart pounding in his chest. His gaze flicked to the tattoo, unease prickling his skin. Whatever it meant, it was dangerous. He was sure of it. The hospital was bright and sterile, a stark contrast to the cold, dark night outside. Ryan watched as doctors and nurses rushed the woman away, their faces grim as they wheeled her into the emergency room. He paced the waiting area. The image of the tattoo burned into his mind, vivid and haunting. He knew he had seen it before, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't remember where. As he replayed the night over and over, his thoughts were interrupted by a nurse who approached him, her face pale and eyes wide. She hesitated, glancing around before leaning in close, her voice a whisper. "Where did you find her?" He explained about the snow-covered road, her body freezing and broken. The nurse's eyes flicked to his wrist, then quickly away, fear shadowing her face. "You should be careful. That tattoo. It belongs to people you don't want to cross." Ryan's blood ran cold, but before he could ask more, the nurse hurried away, disappearing down the hall. He stood there, stunned, fear swirling through him. What had he gotten himself into? And who was the woman lying unconscious behind those hospital doors? He looked at his phone, his daughter's face smiling back at him from the wallpaper, his chest tightening with fear and guilt. He had to go home, to be with her, to fight for her. But even as he turned to leave, he knew he wouldn't be able to forget the woman or the symbol on her wrist. It was too late. He was already entangled in whatever danger she was running from. As he walked out into the snow, the feeling of being watched prickled his neck. He looked back at the hospital, shadows lurking behind the windows, eyes following him. He shivered, pulling his jacket tighter, but the cold didn't leave him. He had saved her life, but at what cost? Whatever the tattoo meant, it was a secret worth killing for. He just hoped it wouldn't be his family that paid the price. The next day, Ryan couldn't shake off the chill that had settled in his bones, an unease that gnawed at him, refusing to let go. The woman's face haunted him, her terrified eyes, her trembling voice whispering that she couldn't remember who she was. And that tattoo, vivid and haunting, was etched into his mind, twisting in his memory like smoke he couldn't catch. It felt important, as if it held the answers to everything, but he was powerless to understand its meaning. The nurse's terrified face replayed over and over, her whisper echoing in his mind. "That tattoo, it belongs to people you don't want to cross." Ryan knew he wouldn't get any rest until he found out more, so he went back to the hospital, his heart pounding with urgency. But when he asked about the woman, the receptionist stared at him blankly. "I'm sorry, sir, there's no record of her." Confusion twisted through him, and he insisted she check again, describing the woman in detail. But the nurse just shook her head, a look of pity on her face. "No one like that was admitted. Are you sure you brought her here?" His heart raced, cold dread coiling in his stomach. "I was here yesterday. She was freezing to death. I found her in the snow. She was right here." But the nurse's face was blank. "I'm sorry, sir. If she was here, she's been discharged." Ryan stumbled out of the hospital, the world tilting as he tried to process what he'd heard. She was gone. Just like that, vanished without a trace. It didn't make sense. He had seen her, unconscious and helpless, with his own eyes. But now it was as if she never existed. No name, no memory, no record. Only the tattoo remained, vivid and haunting in his mind, the only proof that she was real. He shivered, rubbing his hands together as the cold wind bit at his skin. How could she disappear so completely? Where had she gone, and why did it feel like he was being watched? Driving home, his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror more than once, heart pounding as shadows danced behind him. Every car that followed him for more than a few minutes made his skin crawl. But each time he thought he was being followed, the car would eventually turn off, leaving him to wonder if his mind was playing tricks on him. By the time he pulled into his driveway, exhaustion was pulling at him, but his body was buzzing with adrenaline. He was on edge, senses heightened. Fear coiling tight in his chest, the tattoo, it was dangerous. And he was caught up in its curse. Days passed, but he couldn't forget the woman, couldn't forget the fear in her eyes as she whispered, "I don't know who I am." Every night, he was haunted by nightmares, the tattoo twisting and shifting, becoming a snake that coiled around his throat, choking him until he woke up gasping for air. He became obsessed, unable to think about anything else. Who was she? Where had she gone? And who were the people who could make her disappear so completely? He could still hear the nurse's voice, trembling with fear. "It belongs to people you don't want to cross." But who were they? His daughter's health continued to decline, her fever growing worse each day. Ryan was desperate, fighting exhaustion as he worked double shifts, trying to scrape together enough money for her surgery. But it was never enough. One night, sleep was impossible. He sat at his kitchen table, head in his hands, exhaustion weighing him down. But even as his body screamed for rest, his mind was restless, filled with shadows and unanswered questions. The tattoo, where had he seen it before? Why did it feel so familiar? Desperation drove him to his laptop, his fingers trembling as he typed strange tattoo symbols into the search bar. He scrolled through hundreds of images, eyes blurring as he searched for the design that haunted him. But nothing matched. It was like chasing ghosts. Just as he was about to give up, an image stopped him cold. His heart skipped a beat, his blood turning to ice as he stared at the screen. It was an old news article, a photograph of an elegant man waving at a charity gala. His wrist turned just enough to reveal the exact same tattoo. Ryan's breath caught in his throat, his pulse racing. It was identical. The same twisting lines, the same haunting curves. The headline read, "William Marcellus, head of the Marcellus Empire." Ryan's vision swam as the world tilted around him. William Marcellus, head of the Marcellus family, owners of a global business empire, one of the wealthiest and most powerful families in the country. Untouchable, legends of influence and wealth. His chest tightened, fear curling through him as the implications sank in. The Marcellus family. They were known for their power, for their reach, for the rumors that followed them like shadows. People whispered about them, about the enemies that disappeared without a trace, about the secrets they guarded with deadly precision. And the woman he found on that snowy road was connected to them. The realization sent a chill through him, his stomach twisting with dread. If she was one of them, why was she lying half dead in the snow? Who had tried to kill her? And who was powerful enough to make even the Marcellus family afraid? His phone buzzed, yanking him out of his thoughts, and his blood ran cold as he answered. It was the hospital. The nurse's voice was urgent, strained with panic. "Mr. Ryan, it's your daughter. Her condition has worsened. You need to come quickly." His heart shattered, fear and guilt crashing over him as he ran out the door, snow whipping at his face. He barely felt the cold as he raced to the hospital, legs shaking as he burst through the doors, breathless with terror. His wife's face was pale, eyes hollow with grief as she clutched his arm, tears streaming down her face. They said she won't make it without the surgery." Her voice broke, her body trembling as she sobbed, broken and defeated. "We're losing her, Ryan. We're losing her." His world collapsed, his vision blurring as he held her, his own tears burning his face. There was nothing he could do. He was powerless. He had failed her. He had failed his little girl. Then, out of nowhere, the doctor appeared, eyes wide with disbelief. "Mr. Ryan, the surgery, it's been paid for, in full." Ryan's head snapped up, heart pounding as hope and confusion warred inside him. "What? Who? Who did it?" But the doctor shook his head just as baffled. There was no name, just a note, saying it was a debt repaid. Relief flooded him, followed by a wave of confusion and disbelief. Who would spend that much money to save his daughter's life? The question haunted him as he sat by her hospital bed, watching her tiny chest rise and fall, her face peaceful for the first time in months. Gratitude filled him, but so did fear. Days passed. His daughter recovered quickly, her laughter filling the hospital room, but Ryan's thoughts were tangled in questions he couldn't answer. He tried asking the hospital staff who made the payment, but no one had seen anyone. It was as if the money had appeared out of thin air. But he knew the truth. It was her. It had to be. The woman he found in the snow, the one with the strange tattoo. But how? How did she remember? And where was she now? On the fourth day, as he sat holding his daughter's hand, the hospital room door opened. He looked up, his heart stopping as he saw her standing there, the woman he saved on that snowy night. But she wasn't the same. Gone was the terrified girl who didn't know her own name. She stood tall, powerful, dressed in expensive clothing that screamed wealth and authority. And behind her was a man whose presence filled the room with cold command. His face was familiar, his wrist bearing the tattoo that had haunted Ryan's dreams. William Marcellus, head of the Marcellus Empire. Ryan's mouth went dry, his heart hammering as he realized who she was. Selina Marcellus, the missing daughter of the most powerful family in the country, the heir to an empire, and he had found her, half dead in the snow, with no memory of who she was. William Marcellus's gaze was piercing, his voice calm but heavy with authority. "You saved my daughter's life." It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. Ryan swallowed, his mouth suddenly dry. He looked at Selina, who stepped forward, her eyes softening as she spoke. "I remember everything now. You found me when I was broken, when I didn't even know my own name. You didn't leave me. You saved me. You gave me back my life." Her eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. "You gave me the chance to remember who I am." Ryan was speechless, his heart aching as he remembered the fear in her eyes that night, her desperate whisper, "Who am I?" She looked at his daughter, sleeping peacefully in the hospital bed, her face tender. "I was lost, but you showed me kindness. You gave me hope when I had nothing. So I gave that hope back to you. I couldn't let her die, not after what you did for me." William's voice was low, laced with pain and anger. "My enemies thought they could break me by taking her. They attacked her, left her to die in the snow, hoping she would never be found. They tried to erase her, to destroy my bloodline and take everything I've built." His face hardened, his jaw tight. "But they underestimated you. They didn't count on a stranger's kindness saving my daughter's life." He took a step closer, his eyes fierce. "They wanted to bury my legacy, but you brought her back to me." Ryan's blood ran cold as the pieces fell into place. The attack, the memory loss, the tattoo. It all made sense now. Selena had been a target, a pawn in a power struggle far beyond anything he could have imagined. But his act of compassion had undone their plan. His heart raced as he realized the danger he was in. If they were willing to kill her, what would they do to him for saving her? William's gaze softened, his voice steady. "I know what you're thinking, that you're in danger. And you're right. My enemies won't stop, not until they've taken everything from me." He looked at Ryan's daughter, his face grim. "But they won't touch your family, not while I'm alive, not while the Marcellus name still means something." His words were a promise, heavy and powerful. Ryan felt a weight lift from his shoulders, relief flooding him. Tears burned in Ryan's eyes as he realized what she had done. She had saved his daughter's life because he saved hers. Selena reached out, taking his hands in hers, her grip warm and steady. "Sometimes, helping a stranger can save you in ways you never expected. You saved me, and I saved her. We saved each other." Ryan's vision blurred with tears as he held her hands, his heart full. They stood there in silence, a bond of gratitude and friendship tying them together, forever connected by the kindness that saved them both. William Marcellus's gaze softened, his voice gentle. "If you ever need anything, you will find our doors open. You and your family are under the protection of the Marcellus name, always." Ryan knew that his life was changed forever. He was safe, his daughter was safe, and he would never face danger alone again. As he watched them leave, his heart felt light for the first time in months. They saved each other in ways no one else could understand. And it all began on that snowy road, when he stopped for a stranger and saw the tattoo that changed his life. Kindness is a gift that costs nothing, but its value is beyond measure. It can change a life, save a soul, and create a bond that lasts forever. In a world that is often cold and unforgiving, be the light that guides someone back from the darkness. You never know whose life you might save, including your own. If this story moved you, take a moment today to show compassion to someone in need. A simple act of kindness can change the world, one life at a time.